Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session today, which is called Demystifying the Law School Admissions Process. Uh, Welcome on behalf of the Southwest Association of Pre-Law Advisors. My name is Barbara Kirby, and I'm the treasurer of the organization. And we are the sponsors of this September series where we are trying to bring to our students admissions people from all of the law schools within our, Southwestern region and making them available to you for question and answer. Here's how we're going to do today. I'm going to introduce our panel to you and allow them to talk some about each of their particular schools. And then we will have a series of questions for them. And as moderator, my job will be to watch the timing, to keep the session going, and then mostly to stay out of the way so that you can hear the fantastic things that all of our law school admissions people have to say. We've got a lot of questions, and so I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to reach everyone. However, there is a session next week that is regarding personal statements, letters of recommendation, and resumes, and those types of components to your law school application. So although we got a lot of questions about personal statements, we're not going to be talking about that this week. So please tune in at the same time next week, and you'll be able to ask all of your questions about that. So the first thing I want to do is give a brief introduction of each of our panel members today. I love talking about other people's resumes and what great things they've done, but I'm not going to do that as much as I'd like to because I'm cutting into their time talking about their schools. And I'm sure they would rather talk about their schools than hear me talk about them. So without further ado, our panelists today. Sean Adams is the Assistant Director for Recruitment at the Texas Tech School of Law. Rick Bolt is the Assistant Director of Law Admissions at Loyola University in New Orleans at their College of Law. Catherine Sims is here today. She's the Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at Baylor Law in Waco. Did Natalia make it yet?
Sure.
Okay, we won't worry.
No, I'm here.
Natalia's here? Yay! Natalia Cashin is the Assistant Director of the Office of Admissions at Texas A&M School of Law. Then we have with us Dr. Sam Riley, who is the Senior Director for Admissions Programs at the University of Texas School of Law. And then finally, we have David Weiberg, who is the Assistant Dean of Admissions at Tulane Law School in New Orleans. So I'm going to, call upon each of you to tell us a little bit about your school, yourself, your programs. Just give us a quick overview. Sean, you want to start off talking about Texas Tech?
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Shawn Adams from the Texas Tech School of Law. We are in West Texas and in the Lubbock area, which is right below the panhandle of Texas. And our law school has a lot of great benefits to it. We have 10 dual degree programs. We have 8 live clinics where you actually get to practice law. We have 4 different journals. We have one of the top national ABA competition advocacy programs in the nation. So if you want to, really get those skills in for being in a courtroom, we do that really well. And we have a fantastic legal writing and legal practice program. So it's really just a great program for any type of law that you might want to practice. And of course, because we are in West Texas, we are located in an area where there's a lot of agriculture, there's a lot of oil and gas. We also, are big in sports. So there's a lot of different things that you could do coming out of here to help you prepare. So.
Okay, Rick, tell us about Loyola New Orleans.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Rick Bolte. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions at Loyola. I'm also a 2013 grad and a former practicing attorney not so much anymore. I always have to say there's a what and a where to a law school. The what is that we're a Catholic Jesuit school, and we're the only Jesuit school in the South. And I mention that because one of our missions is to help the general public and kind of teach social justice and public interest work. One way we do that is through our clinic. We have 10 clinics ranging from criminal defense to law and legal innovation or immigration. The where is that we're in uptown New Orleans. And what's really cool about that is the city of New Orleans has every single court except for the United States Supreme Court. So the Fifth Circuit, which covers Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, that's downtown. The Supreme Court of Louisiana in the French Quarter. We also have an immigration court and a tax court. So it gives our students a lot of opportunities, both while in school and after graduation, to practice in these great federal and state courts. Also being in New Orleans, if you're drinking coffee in Baton Rouge, that coffee came from Port Orleans. So a lot of maritime law, shipping, as well as oil and gas, and environmental law. So one more thing is that we are New Orleans, so a lot of music, a lot of movies are filmed down here. So there's a lot of IP work that you can do as well. So a lot of opportunities for our students, and look forward to speaking with you more.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Catherine, tell us about Baylor.
So, as Ms. Kirby said, I'm Catherine Sims, Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at Baylor Law. We are located in Waco, Texas. If you're not familiar, that's about an hour and a half, 2 hours south of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and about an hour and a half north of the capital of Austin. We are a little different here in Waco. We operate on the quarter system. So 1 quarter is 9 weeks, 3 quarters is 1 year of law school, and 9 quarters is the total program. We do enroll students 3 times a year in our spring, summer, and fall classes, and then we graduate a class every single quarter of the year. So there's a lot of flexibility built into our program. We also require more than a traditional law school because we are 9 terms versus 6. So students will take 7 quarters worth of required legal writing. We also have what we're most known for is our practice court program in the 3rd year, where students walk through the steps of multiple trials under the supervision of advocacy faculty and practicing attorneys. But we also have a significant amount of transactional offerings for our students, like a business law boot camp and corporate in-house counsel internship program. Great clinical opportunities that are all service-based and not for class credit in the areas of immigration, veterans needs, wills and estates, intellectual property, and trial advocacy. That's just a little bit about Baylor, and I look forward to getting to know you today and answering your questions and allowing y'all to get to know us a little bit better.
Thank you, Catherine. Now we have Natalia Cashin, the Assistant Director of the Office of Admissions at Texas A&M. Natalia?
Howdy, everyone. It's how we like to say hello here at Texas A&M School of Law. As Barbara mentioned, my name is Natalia Cashin. I'm the Assistant Director. I'm also a graduate of the law school. I practiced appellate immigration law when I graduated, and then I was recruited by the law school to join the Career Services Office. I was there for about 3 years and now have been in admissions for about 3 years. The law school is located in downtown Fort Worth. So you have access to a lot of amazing internship and externship opportunities with federal government agencies, law firms, courthouses, et cetera. I think we have a lot of the same programs as everybody else on the panel in terms of clinics and advocacy. But the thing I like the most about our school is that we have a commitment to tailor and to individualize your experience and to really figure out what you want to do with your career in a broader sense of the word. And so we have a required course in your first year called Professional Identity. And it is not black letter law. In fact, it's very focused on who are you, what are your values, what motivates you, and how is that going to play into your career? And so you're able to really explore what the legal profession looks like, and then be better equipped throughout your future semesters to pick the clinics, externships, internship opportunities that are going to shape your experience and make you competitive in the legal field. We also, I think, are known for our Aggie network. If you have yet to meet an Aggie, you may not know what this means. if you've encountered any Aggies, you will know we just are very loyal to each other. We have core values that we commit to. And so that means that our students are able to take jobs and opportunities all over Texas, but also across the nation due to the loyalty of our 500,000 plus former students. I'm very excited to be here today, and I look forward to meeting with all of you.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Okay, next we have Sam Riley from the University of Texas, from UT Law.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you all. I am the Senior Director of Admissions Programs here at Texas Law. I've been in that role, it'll be 16 years in May of 2022. I am not a JD. I'm a triple Longhorn, so I have a bachelor's, master's, and a doctoral degree from this great institution, the University of Texas at Austin. The law school is located in the northeast corner of the campus. If you're familiar with Austin and the UT Austin campus, if not, hopefully you will visit soon. But we're in the northeast corner. It's comprised of 3 different buildings total. If you're not familiar with Austin, Austin is in the central part of Texas, an hour's drive from San Antonio if you're on the south side. If you're on the north side, it'll be an hour and a half. 3-hour drive to Dallas, Fort Worth, 2.5-hour drive to Austin or to Houston. Just to give you an idea, we are historically a larger law school. We were probably in the top 5 for years. We had incoming class sizes of 400 to 500 students, and then in 2006, under our new dean at that time, Dean Sager, he wanted to go below 400 to have a small student-faculty ratio, which was good for the faculty and the students. So we've been averaging about 300 students for the past several years. This year was an anomaly. We were over 400 for the first time in a while. But we are considered a larger law school. We currently have 15 clinics, 10 different centers, 10 dual degree programs, a lot of different programs for our students to get involved with, 90 tenured faculty members, over 130 adjuncts and lecturers at our disposal. So we offer about 110 different elective classes each semester for our students to choose from. So they have a plethora of different avenues they can go in their second and third years before they decide on what they want to do for the future, their first job out of law school. We have some awesome programs that are pretty unique, I think. Our society program, I recommend you take a look at that on our website, is a mentoring program that we created back in 2004 where we divide our students into 8 societies. So we divide our incoming class into 4 sections, and each section is divided into 2 societies. And those societies are for our students to hang out together outside of class. And it was to help those students get acclimated to the state of Texas if they've never been here, Austin, the UT culture. Believe it or not, there were some of our students in our incoming classes who had never been to a football game. And that was quite a shock to them because we were just north of the football stadium. So if they came to study on a Saturday morning, and it was a home game, they ran into about 500,000 people tailgating right out here on the front lawn of the law school and the surrounding area, of course. But the society program is pretty unique. It's created a lot of camaraderie amongst our students, and it gets them to know each other quite soon before even the first day of orientation. So take a look at Texas Law. I'm glad to be here, and hopefully I can answer some questions for you today.
Thank you so much, Sam. And finally, we have David from Tulane. Tell us about Tulane.
Thank you, Barbara. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Weinberg. I'm the Assistant Dean for Admission at Tulane University Law School, also in New Orleans. As I was listening to Rick describe Loyola, the first thing that came to mind is like, wait a minute, he's describing my school. And we both represent very different institutions. And yet the reason I think it really does sound like Tulane is because both of us represent institutions that are proud to be New Orleanian. New Orleans, I hope all of you have gotten a chance to visit New Orleans or are planning to at some point. If you have not, you're losing out. I don't get paid on the side by the Bureau of Tourism, but I absolutely adore my hometown. And I'm a native New Yorker. I'm proud actually to be a New Yorker. I think I'm one of the luckiest people in the world that gets to call both New York and New Orleans my home. And I think, just like Loyola, Tulane has exceptional strengths in the area of maritime law, energy, environmental law, sports law, international comparative law, a really strong interest in social justice and public interest. While Loyola is a Jesuit institution and Tulane is private, non-religious affiliated, I think New Orleans really brings out a spirit in people when it comes to giving back and helping and contributing to society. Tulane was in fact the first law school in the United States to have a requirement of pro bono service to graduate. It was fun a few years back, actually it's more than a few years back now, to see that was actually a answer on Jeopardy. And so I was like, wait, I know that, that's my school. One thing I'm actually gonna just highlight, which actually is a me too for Rick, because it applies to both of our schools. We're in the state of Louisiana. And so I'll just use this time to actually talk about something that applies to actually both of our schools, as well as our colleagues. If LSU was here and Southern were here, it applies to them too. Many of you here in this room are from other SWAPLA states other than Louisiana. If you're from Louisiana, I apologize, you probably know this already, but Louisiana's legal tradition does not come from the British common law. It comes from the civil system, the tradition of law found in France and Spain. Long story short, more based on a code that's interpreted rather than a judicial system that created a common law through appellate decisions over time. Over time, actually, it doesn't really, while they're different systems, they're very similar, and over time, the differences have sort of gone away. And we are a civil law state in a common law country. We're not actually the only place that is like this. Other places include Quebec in Canada, Puerto Rico, in fact, similar colonial history. And I just will put out the word, if you have that rogue uncle of yours who says, I shouldn't go to law school in Louisiana because you're not going to learn the law that applies to Texas or California or Florida. In fact, that's incorrect. All of the schools I've mentioned, the two here today, the other two law schools in Louisiana, were all ABA accredited. And so we offer a full common law tradition as well as civil law tradition. And in fact, the beautiful thing about that is we have a lot of our students interested in international law. And we are effectively, that's one of the reasons international law is so special here, is we are a comparative state. And so the majority of people in the world live in a society which has a civil law justice system. And so for anyone interested in international comparative law, Louisiana, in fact, is right, almost in your own backyard, and an opportunity to really explore both the civil and common law tradition, which we celebrate as well. In the chat, I will put a link to, we have a series of videos that are deeper dives on all of our subject matter and our class profile. I'm happy to answer questions we have today, but feel free to use those links if you want a deeper dive into any of those subjects that we offer at Tulane.
Thank you so much, David. And I'll just throw in there, when I was a corporate attorney in Louisiana, was part of my region, I never tried to do anything on my own. I always had local counsel in New Orleans who answered all the questions for me. So being a specialist in that way can be great too. Let's get into the meat of the questions. I'm going to shift up the order a little bit just to kind of go around in our panels. The first area that we are going to discuss is, I know what all of these students want to know. They want to know what matters to you in law school admissions. When you are looking at the package, how is it that you're evaluating LSAT scores, GPA? How are you looking at majors and minors and extracurricular activities? So if you could each give us kind of an overview. I know you all look at thousands of applications individually, and I think that's important for our students to know. These are the people who are actually looking at applications. So let's hear, what is it you're looking for when you're reviewing an application? I'm just going to throw in here, Catherine, let's start with you.
Well, I think it's important to note that most law schools don't assign different weights or percentages or point values to the different pieces of the application package, and truly take a holistic approach to looking at applications. So when you're putting everything together, make sure that you're spending a significant amount of time on every single thing that you're going to submit to the law schools to which you're applying. So of course, we will all have our median LSATs, our median GPAs, And right, the ideal is that you're at or above both, right? But that's not always the case. The ideal is not. So if you do fall below one median, you really want to be above the other to put yourself in the best position for admission and scholarship potential. However, if you fall below both, it's not the be all end all and a nail in the coffin. Really, we spend a significant amount of time on the personal statement, the resume, letters of recommendation, and things that we're really looking for beyond LSAT and GPA are strong writing skills, commitment to service, and leadership. So any way that you can really display those qualities through your personal statement, through any optional addenda, through your resume, that's really going to behoove you. And we really want to get to know you. It's really boring to have cookie cutter individuals in each of our seats. So we want to see unique experiences. We don't look for specific content. At least at Baylor, we don't have a specific prompt for our personal statement because we really want to get to know you and what you want us to know about you. And when I'm looking at your resume, I'm looking for not just, okay, I participated in X activity, or, you know, I had this part-time or full-time job. I really want to see the amount of time that you committed to each of those activities, the skills that you gained, different specific projects you worked on, so we can get a full and clear picture of who you are, what you've experienced, and what you would bring to the class. So, I mean, for me in particular, I guess I'm just looking for unique individuals with interesting experiences who I think can tackle a rigorous program based upon the information that I'm seeing. But also, I think it's important to note that you're not stuck with just the required pieces of the application package. If there's something that you feel like is a potential weakness, address that head on, give us context, really allow us to understand what was going on. Maybe a specific year in school when your grades are a little bit lower. And on the other side of things, if there's something that's, you know, really special and unique about you that doesn't fit in your personal statement, maybe submit a diversity statement, submit a statement about why you really love Baylor, something like that. So just, again, don't leave anything unsaid, and then look for opportunities to connect with us, because again, I think all of us really want to get to know you. We want to make sure that we are making the right decisions. And when I look at applications, I'm not looking for reasons to deny you. I'm actually looking for reasons to admit you. I want to see what's, you know, really special about you, and every applicant is special in some respect. And so connect with us. We have optional interviews. I always highly encourage that. It's a great supplement to your application. If schools don't have that, though, you can still connect with those admissions representatives and with those schools in a variety of other ways. So again, it's just about providing the clear picture, addressing weaknesses and strengths just head on, and not leaving anything unsaid. That's kind of my overarching advice there.
Great, thank you. So Sam, you look at a lot of applications, and there's a certain extent to which we know that LSAT and GPA are important there. Tell me how you're reviewing an application and what it is you're looking to find in the students.
Yeah, and I would say LSAT and GPA are important to everybody, every law school. We just have our different benchmarks that we have based on our last classes, medians, and things like that. But it's a lot of the same things that Catherine mentioned already. I will just try to mention a few more things, but the LSAT and GPA, I think that's what you want me to focus on primarily. But yeah, they're not the end all be all, but they are important, right? So if you look at a law school's medians, you will have to know that's the middle person for each category. They're not the same person. So there's 50% of those people have below that. And another good benchmark to look at are the 25th and 75th percentiles for that incoming class. And you can get that information from the 509 reports. That information tells you about the incoming class. It doesn't tell you about the number of people we admitted, but you can find it on the report as well. So just about 2 years ago, I will use those numbers. We had about 5,500 applicants and we admitted about 1,000. So everyone did not have a 168 LSAT and higher. There were 50% of those people were below that. And typically the people that we admitted were around those same numbers. So that tells you something that, even if your numbers are below our medians, you will have an opportunity. And the key question a lot of people want to know is what did they have that others did not have? And so we look for a lot of the things that Catherine mentioned. We're a state institution, so we're funded by the state. We're looking for people who are from different areas of the state of Texas. But we also admit out-of-state students as well. We're looking for the historically underrepresented and historically disadvantaged students as well. So we're looking for a lot of different things, but primarily leadership skills are very important for you to exhibit in your resume. Is a really good place for you to show that, utilizing the different avenues that our law schools will give you. At Texas Law, your resume can be up to 3 pages. That allows you to use bullet points to tell us the different types of leadership skills you had in each of those different areas, if you have those. But yeah, there's so much we can say about the LSAT and GPA. Again, they are important factors, but they're ways for you to become a lawyer based on what LSAT scores and GPAs you have by applying strategically to different law schools. There's over 200. I think there's only 199 now, if I'm not mistaken, accredited law schools in the United States. So applying strategically with the LSAT scores or scores that you have in your GPA will give you an opportunity to get to being a lawyer and eventually an attorney. Oh, Barbara, you're muted.
Thank you. I thought I'd give away with not doing that once today. So let me hear from Mr. Weiberg about Tulane. You're sitting down to look at all of those applications. What is it that stands out to you that makes you separate one student from another?
So one of the benefits of being on a panel like this and not going first is you get to listen to your wonderful colleagues who've been doing this for as long as you have, if not longer, in the case of Dr. Sam, and know that I know already that you're getting terrific advice, and that's why I enjoy working with all of you. Catherine said something I want to add on to because it's really advice that's so key. I agree with this. We're looking for reasons to admit you. We're not looking for reasons to deny admission. And as much as this sounds kind of very like new agey philosophy, I think it is really mission critical to your strategy on how you look at yourself as an applicant. There's lots of moving parts to your application: personal statements, resumes, statements of interest. These are all things in your application that you should be approaching with a sense of accomplishment and positivity. There are other places in your application that are absolutely the other piece of advice given about addressing your weaknesses. Yes, address your weaknesses, but address them in the appropriate places. And so a few things to just say. A lot of applicants talk very much about, ask questions about addendi, what should I be adding? My first piece of advice is, before you worry about addendum, look at what's actually asked of you. There are applications such as Tulane's where we formalize the question for you to address any particular academic challenges, standardized testing challenges you've had. And we actually do have wording in the prompt that talks about what we would like to hear from. And actually, it's not just addressing that I had a problem, but also how you worked through that issue or challenge, and why is this particular challenge you had in the past something that isn't a challenge today? How have you become a better student or a better writer, or addressed your challenges with standardized testing? So the key here is use the parts of the application that are meant to put your best foot forward for that purpose. Use those other pieces to address things honestly, but I think it sometimes is in your best interest not to mix the two. If you feel your personal statement is your story of strength and positivity and what you'll contribute to a law school, it sometimes will get muddled if you think of it as, I need to address all my excuses and weaknesses at the same time. Use all of your real estate. All of the real estate is all the pieces that give you an opportunity to write in your application. The other thing I want to add to is I try my best actually not to talk about GPA as much as I talk about your overall academic record, because in truth, I see too many candidates really hyper obsessing over what their GPA is and sort of not seeing that the bigger picture is the GPA is a data point that represents your entire academic record. But your entire academic record matters. And I think we're not going to get through today without someone addressing, and I'll do it right now, this whole pandemic thing has been a kind of a challenge for everyone involved. And so I don't do a Zoom event anymore without immediately saying, I hope you're doing well. I hope your family is doing well. Take care of yourself. That's the most important thing you can be doing, even if things are getting better and we have vaccines. But you know, a lot of you went through periods of time, depending on your school, where grades went past fail, or they didn't go past fail. Maybe they should have gone past fail. Some people thrived in the pandemic. Like, they loved being at home and found themselves actually to be better students. Others struggled. And so as we look at your GPA in this context, it's just a number without knowing all of the other moving parts. So we really do in our process, and I know many law schools feel the same way, we literally are reading your transcript in the same way we would read another piece of your file. And we're looking for the trends in your grades. We're looking at the blips in your grades. The pandemic is going to be a blip in all of your transcripts. And so we know what was going on. We know what we were doing. We were all in this together. And rest assured, I think you can rest assured that the people looking at your application are going to understand the context for which we were all working in. If you had particular challenges, God forbid you were ill or taking care of someone who was ill or lost your job or had a financial issue, those are things in the context that we're all working in that you really do want to the best of your ability, talk about. This is the part of the application process which it does take a little bit of, I think, risk on your part to be vulnerable, but I think it helps for you to really understand that the more you can share of your particular perspective, it gives us the context for understanding what that GPA actually means. And I'm sure I'm happy to answer 4 questions on this, but I think I've said enough on this point right now.
Thank you. That's great. And I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on Natalia now. And for our next 3 folks, I invite you to say anything you'd like to about that part of your admissions process. But I'd like to ask you to dig a little bit deeper as well. What are you looking for? Students are always asking me about their majors and what is the law school looking for in my major? What are they looking for in the kind of curriculum I have, the rigor of it? So if you could, in addition to kind of talking about your review of applicants, tell us about what your thoughts are about, academic activity and academic majors.
Sure. I think, these are really great questions, and it was not, to me, it was not that long ago, right, that I was applying to law school, even though it was a long time ago. And I know that it's easy for students to get really wrapped up in all of these tiny details, if I do this minor, or if I do this major, will that get me into law school? Or if I do this activity or this scholarship, will that get me into law school? And I think it is important to do what Catherine says, which is to zoom back out to see, the forest for the trees, and remember that we're looking at your whole picture. And so when I give advice about what we're looking for consistency, for attention to detail. That sounds really silly, but actually, we read 4,000 applications at our school, and it's rare that we find people that really spend the time making sure they're following the instructions, they're keeping to the page limits, they're looking for spelling errors, that they're putting the right names of the right law schools that they're addressing. And so as you are stressing out about all of these major things, also think about the little things that are going to set you apart. And I think that speaks to the academic rigor and background, right? We have students that apply with all types of degrees, I'm sure we have a million poli-sci history majors out there right now. That was me. But we have STEM majors, we have art majors, all sorts of undergraduate degrees, and they all do, to my chagrin, do fairly well and much better than me sometimes. Our STEM majors write really well because writing in law school is very different than writing at the undergraduate level. And those technical skills come in handy. And so I don't sit down in front of my computer and think, okay, we really need this type of major and look for that. What we do is we look at this application and say, okay, this person is this major. And now with the cast that we have in front of us, we can see how well they did each semester, what courses they took, if there's any trends in courses that they did poorly in or did well in. And so then when we're doing that review, we can tell whether you were a committed student, you were dedicated. That will also reflect in your resume. It'll reflect in the letters of recommendation. And so more than anything, pick a degree that you're going to do well in and that you're going to enjoy. That's going to benefit you on the GPA side. It's going to benefit you in connecting with your classmates and being involved and connecting with your faculty and getting letters of recommendation. And if you do well in any of those areas, that means that you're prepared for the rigor of law school, and you're going to bring a diverse experience to your class. And so I think more than anything, it's just do well and be committed to what you're doing rather than the topic or the major or the minor that you're focused on.
Thank you. And I want to continue that kind of part of the conversation with Rick. I always, and I know many of us pre-law advisors, students will ask us, does it help if I do a double major? How do law schools look at it if I got two majors? What if I get a minor? Is that something you're particularly looking for, or is it just part of the evaluation?
It's not something we're specifically looking for, because think of law school, we are a professional school, and to a certain extent, we're a trade school. We're going to teach you how to be a lawyer, right? So just like there are different majors in undergrad, there are different types of law. I mean, tax law, criminal law, environmental, they're drastically different. So one major doesn't necessarily predict success in law school. So yeah, we're more concerned about, can you do the three things? Can you graduate, pass the bar, get a job? I mean, your application is your interview. We're trying to figure out, can you do these things? So your academic success is important to us because, prior success usually predicts future success. But with that, you mentioned double majors. I don't care if you have a double major per se. I mean, it's impressive, but also, what did you do in addition to going to school? Because law school, you are juggling not only school, but work, family, applying for jobs, getting ready to take the bar. So I want to see not only that you succeed in school, but that you were able to juggle more things. And that could be leadership, that could be a job. It doesn't really matter. So to your question, no, it's not specific that you need a double major.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now it's time for Sean. So I'm going to let you do any kind of wrap up that you want to do about the application process at your school and the whole of what you consider. I haven't heard the word holistically in this conversation yet, and I think it's the first time I've had 6 law school admissions people and the word hasn't come up yet. So feel free to toss in something about how you review every part of the file.
I could be wrong, but I thought Catherine brought up holistic review.
Oh,
But
okay.
yes, we definitely all look at everything holistically. I did want to touch on some things. I see in the chat that somebody had asked about GREs versus LSAT. There are schools that are taking the GRE. There's a lot of, like, all law schools will take the LSAT. There are some schools that are accepting the GRE. Keep in mind, if you were trying to use the GRE, you cannot have taken an LSAT previously because you can't take both and decide which score you want to submit. If you've taken the LSAT, that's going to be what they go with. Most law schools will go with your top score. There are a few that will average or take the average score, but for the most part, if you're retaking the LSAT, they're going to take your top score. As far as GPA, Man, that is a loaded question, because there are people that go straight through from high school on to college. There are people that, like me, I was non-traditional, so I took a very long break before even attending college and then attending law school. So some people take that break because maybe they went through straight from high school. They got out there on their first time freshman year, out on their own, no parents, no bedtimes, could go and do whatever they want. And perhaps they did not spend as much time focusing on their studies as maybe they should have. This is where a grade addendum comes in handy, because sometimes what you can do is oftentimes, unlike Catherine, we do not do any type of interviews for students who are applying to our law school. So if it's not in your application, we will not know it. And if I'm looking at your transcript and I see that you have a low GPA, I'm going to start looking at how you did in each year and how you did in specific class. I'm looking for how well you did in writing and research intensive courses, because that's the majority of what you're going to do in law school. But if you had, let's say, a bad freshman year, or you had a fantastic freshman and sophomore year, then you tanked one semester junior year, and then your grade shot back up, you're going to want to write an addendum for that, because you don't want to leave me guessing as to what was going on. I have a very wild imagination, y'all, so you do not want to leave me guessing what was happening there. You want to write an addendum. Same thing with the LSAT. If you're taking multiple LSATs and your score goes, I'd say, up or down more than 3 points, you're probably going to want to write an LSAT addendum for that and let us know if it went up. What did you do differently? Did you change your program? Did you decide to, focus more? Maybe you left a job so that you could focus more on it, whatever was going on, and vice versa. I did want to leave you guys with an amazing tool. I'm dropping it into the chat. This is, it's not the end all be all. I know you guys want to know where you sit as far as your LSAT and GPA. There's a great predictor tool that's on the LSAC website, and you can plug in your GPA and your LSAT score. And this will kind of show you, again, there's so many variables. If you did terribly, but you write an addendum and you explain how, you focused and you brought your grades back up, and then I can see that you were academically successful, or maybe you weren't that great in undergrad and you went back and got a master's later on and got a 4.0. We're taking all of that into consideration. So the GPA and LSAT are not the end all be all of how we're going to decide. We do look at everything holistically, but you can plug in your GPA and LSAT and it will help you determine if maybe you need to retake the LSAT. Maybe you need to study a little bit longer. Sometimes by the time that you're applying, your GPA is set in stone, but your LSAT can change. So I just kind of wanted to give you guys those kinds of tools. And as far as the major, yes, all majors can lead to law school. So really what we're looking for in your entire application is how well you perform academically. You need to show us that you are ready for the rigor of law school, which is a difficult program. We want to see that you are active in the community. We're looking at your resumes to see how did you spend time outside of work or outside of class? How did you spend your time? We're looking at your letters of recommendation, we're looking for what people can tell us about your actual work ethic. And when we're looking at your personal statement, we're looking at your writing skills, but we are also looking at who you are as a person. So we're looking into all of that. I hope that wasn't too long.
No, that wasn't too long at all. That was very good information. We're seeing a lot of great questions in the chat too, and I want to assure everyone that we're going to get to each of those questions. In fact, I'm going to shift up a little bit right now from the format that I told our panelists we would have and throw out something new. Last year was the weirdest admission cycle ever. And I think it's creating a lot of questions for students and for us pre-law advisors about what's the next cycle going to look like. And I think, to me, there are two very important factors of that. One is the timing of your application. When should you get it in? What does it mean in terms of what's early? And then the second question being, if you put in applications last year and you're resubmitting, is there something different? And so I'm going to ask each of you, and I, as a quick part of the answer, tell us if you have some kind of early decision process, and if so, what does that mean? And then just talking about kind of the timing of applications this year. So I'm kind of going to go in the order that I'm seeing folks. So I'm going to start off with David.
Sure. So I guess let me start by taking the word you just used, Barbara, and saying this was a weird admission cycle we were just in. I don't know if I'd use the word weird, definitely unprecedented for many of us. In fact, I don't think it was weird because at the end of the day, it kind of played out the way you'd expect. Law schools enrolled classes, people are attending law school, and at the end of the day, I think what ultimately did occur was just for most of us, the sheer volume of applications we received was through the roof. At Tulane, we were on the extreme end of that. Our application volume increased about 45% from the year prior. The average across the United States at most law schools was an increase somewhere between, I think, 10 and 20% at most law schools. And so to see 45 was a bit startling, but it does play into the answer to your question of when to apply. And I think it might surprise some pre-law advisors that I'm actually not going to say apply early. You should apply early, but I will be honest and say that I will not be surprised, because I know this will be the case at Tulane, that decisions won't be coming out very early. We're being very candid with candidates applying this year, as we were last year, actually. We begin accepting applications in September. So if your application is absolutely ready to submit, go ahead and submit it. There is a benefit, let me be clear, there is a benefit in a rolling admissions process to applying early. But there is a point to make here, which is that you don't want to sacrifice the quality of your application over speed. And so if a candidate's ready to apply in September, great. If you're not ready to apply in September, don't stress out. The average applicant to Tulane still only sends their application in the month of January or February. That's when we typically receive about 50% of our applications. And we are still making plenty of offers of admission, and we generally are confident in telling applicants that we're able to consider your application on its full merit for admission and scholarship opportunities, so long as you apply before March. Now, certainly if you apply later than March, which shouldn't be anyone watching this webinar, because everyone watching webinar today is really on the ball preparing. If candidates who apply in March or later, that becomes a challenge, in particular because we start as of May 1st, candidates who are admitted earlier in the process are submitting their seat deposits, formally holding spaces in the class. And so that will actually make our process more conservative. Candidates who might have been offered admission earlier on might find themselves initially on our wait list. And candidates who might be placed on our wait list might be outrightly denied, as we really do get a sense of what the size of the class will look like in the months of April and May. But early is still a big amorphous term. I think early for us is anything in calendar year 2021. We will not, we're accepting applications in September. We don't begin processing our applications until October. Our admissions committee doesn't begin reviewing applications in any way, shape, or form until the month of November. And we sometimes have some decisions available in December. But in light of where the holiday break is this year, I think that we're being candid that most of our decisions, even for a candidate applying in September, you're not likely to hear from us until January. And I will be honest, this is just a prediction. I think this will be the case this year because we had such a volume of applications last year. And as of today, my applications are up again. It's way too early to make predictions of what that means. But we want to get a better sense of, if we ultimately have an increase on top of 45% last year, the admissions committee is going to need to know ultimately how competitive this year is going to be. At Tulane, we enroll a class. Our class size typically is between 215 and 225. And our faculty expect that to be the same next year as well. So with that in mind, we can't over admit, and because we don't want to over enroll. We want the quality of the experience that our students have at Tulane to be consistent from year to year. And so that will likely make the process this year a bit more slow. So if you apply in September, October, November, December, relax. You're likely to get a decision from us around the same point in time. One key element that often comes up, by the way, is that you might you might be worrying because you're going to apply to law schools, but you're also thinking about retaking the LSAT in a future time. Unfortunately, my answer to this question is you're going to have to check with each school about what their policies or procedures will be. Some might suggest you hold your application until, or ask for a hold. Others will automatically place a hold on your file if there's a future test date. Tulane's policy actually is that your file will go into review irrespective of whether you have a future date. But we do note that you have a future date. That's something that our computer system handles. And our admissions committee's policy is such that we won't make a final decision on your file other than an offer of admission if there's a future date pending. So basically, you won't get any bad news from us if you're registered for a future test date. And we think this has worked really well for our committee and gives our candidates the benefit of going into review earlier on. And certainly if the committee is ready to make an offer, they absolutely will do so. But this is an example too, like you're gonna have to, unfortunately, probably ask each individual school or look at the policies that are from that school about how to manage that component of the process. But at the end of the day, just be prepared. I think this is just a guess, but I do think it might just be a little bit slower this year as schools really get a sense of whether last year was completely abnormal or whether or not we're going to continue to see the volume of applications we've recently received.
Well, now I have to go to Dr. Riley because UT is a school that actually has an early decision and a deadline related to it, kind of very much the opposite of Tulane. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about what you think of timing for the upcoming cycle.
You know, I fully agree with Assistant Dean Weinberg about you submit your application when it's 100 and 110% ready to go. You never rush your application. Like I tell you, one of my pet peeves is to see an unprofessional looking personal statement and resume. And I can give you an example of what that is. So if I'm scrolling through, and we scroll when we're reading applications, and they're in order, personal statement, usually then resume, depending on the school. And I see the personal statement, nice 11-point font with 0.5 margins, and our margins are 1-inch margins, and my colleagues are smiling about this. And then I scroll to the resume, and it's in 8-point font. And then I get to the addenda statement, and it's in like 13-point font, trying to fit the whole page. That is so unprofessional looking to me. And I feel as though you did this last night, the night before, and you rushed it. That's the last thing you want to do. You want to take your time, make your resume professional, present yourself in a professional way. I tell people, you're trying to highlight yourself. If you're a shy person and you're not used to bragging on yourself, you need to break away from that. So when you're applying to those 7 or 10 law schools you're applying to, you're saying, this is who I am. I'm the best person you're going to look at today. And make that resume, personal statement, and everything about your application say that. As if you walked into my office in a suit and the angels came down and just glowed and said, this is it. These are all the things I've done in my life. I had a blip in my application or my academic history when I was in undergrad or whatever the case may be. But I got over that, and this is what's going on. Okay, so with that, going back to the point at hand, I've heard other people on other panels say early this year is before Thanksgiving. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. I've heard people say early this year is before November 1st. I've heard Dave say there is no early this year. So again, you need to submit your application when you're ready, when it's 100% ready to go. And I've met a lot of awesome applicants who haven't gotten admitted to Texas law. And I saw someone ask, is it okay to ask a law school that I was not admitted to about my application? And we do that at Texas Law, but it's something you need to ask each of those schools to see if they will go over your application to give you some advice. So hopefully that will answer that question for you. But I lost my train of thought because I really wanted to get that answer out there. But submitting your, where was I? I'm sorry. The application or submitting your application in a timely manner. Going to our early decision process, we do have one. That deadline is November 1st. We will get those decisions out to all of those students before January, hopefully by December. So that's the benchmark for that, those people that apply to that program. Again, the deadline is November 1st for our early decision binding program. Those who are admitted will get receive a competitive scholarship, which is a little different than our previous binding program where their applicants received $10,000 a year if they were Texas residents. We thought that may have been unfair for those because if they had applied regular decision, they would have received a more competitive scholarship. So that's what the change is. If you're an out-of-state student and you're admitted to our early decision binding program, you will at least receive a in-state tuition waiver and perhaps more. That's where the competitive part comes in for those applicants. If you apply regular decision, so we have had some folks that have already applied, you will receive your application, your decision in a timely manner. We just don't have a date set to that yet. And it goes along with what David was saying earlier about law schools. It may be a little bit more slower getting those decisions out because we really don't know what is going to happen this year. And some of us are a little gun shy based on what happened in this previous cycle. Again, like David said, it was unprecedented. I've been doing this for almost 16 years. I've never seen anything like that. Here at Texas Law, we had a 40% increase in applications. And not only just in the applications themselves, but when it was time to pay the deposit, we had something that we had never seen before happen then. A lot more people than we anticipated paid their deposit. And then even at the second benchmark, we had a lot more people submit their letter of intent. And so our class came in a little bit over what we expected. We even got a little news in Above the Law. I think they made a little article about us in Above the Law, highlighting that point. So we're going to be looking to see, what's going to happen. We're going to take it a little bit more slower, I believe, this year, as well as other law schools, to make sure that our environment will be good for the next class coming in.
Just two quick follow-up questions for you, Sam. First of all, someone is asking, how many seats do you all usually fill with the early decision? And then my secondary question would be, for students who you do not take in the early decision, tell about what rollover there might be to regular decision.
So there isn't a set number that we take in the early decision applicant pool. It will vary from year to year. It is just as competitive as a regular decision pool. For those applicants that we put on hold, will be held over for a second look with the regular decision pool. And so I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, that does. Thank you. Okay, on the area of timing, are there any of our other members of the panel who would like to chime in about what you think early is, what you think late is, and what you think right on time is?
Yeah, for us, there's kind of two deadlines. We have a rolling admission that goes through August 1st. Don't apply August 1st. It's kind of touch upon something that David said. The later you apply, we're not only looking at you as an applicant, but also how you compare to the group that's already posited. So the later you apply, especially in the rolling admissions, can definitely be a disadvantage to you. Also for us, we do have, there's the admission part and then there's the scholarship part. So for us, I would say as long as you apply between November and March, that's a good time period, especially March 1st, because that's our priority deadline for scholarships. That just means that you will definitely be considered for a scholarship before March 1st, because we can only give out X number of dollars. So that doesn't mean that you'll be denied a scholarship in April or May, but it's the well's drying up basically. So there is a priority deadline for scholarships for us. So yeah, for me, I think it's November, anytime around the holidays is a good time to apply. The converse of that though is that's when most applicants apply. So the decision time will definitely be longer for you. So if you're applying in November or December, it might take 6 to 8 weeks rather than 4 to 6. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
I think it's really,
Sean,
oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's really important to, I just want to piggyback on what everybody else is saying. Make sure that you're turning in a quality application. There are some pet peeves that I think that we all have, or some things that just get on our, nerves a little bit. For me, one of the simple ones is in your application. If you are just not capitalizing, let's say your name or the street that you live on or proper nouns, that bugs me. I don't know why, it just does. It's not going to keep you out, but it does bug me. Making sure if you are attaching, if you're talking about a specific school in your personal statement, or if you are talking to your recommenders and telling them like, oh, I'm dying to go to this school, but I'm also applying to these schools, your recommender might put that first dying to get into school in there. And since you can't read them, you will attach that and send it to other schools. So, just read the documents that you are attaching ahead of time if you can. Make sure that they are all going to the proper place. But yeah, timing is pretty much everything in this process. I love to fall down the rabbit hole of Reddit along with you guys, and sometimes YouTube videos and things. And there's some really bad advice out there. One of them that I heard was schools don't really run out of scholarship money, so you can always press them to get more. And we're a small state school. I can guarantee you we run out of money. So if you're applying with a quality application early in the process, that puts you in a better position, not only to get a seat, but also to get money. And who doesn't want money to go to law school? So yeah, just make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. We can reevaluate, like if you have received a decision back and you retake the LSAT thinking, I think I could probably get a couple more points. If you want to do that to yourself, because the LSAT is not a fun exam and it costs money, but if you do think that you can gain more points, and you do, you can ask us one time for a reevaluation based on the new score, or a higher GPA or something like that. So these are things to keep in mind when you are going through the application process, but just put your best foot forward the first time. And make sure that you're really putting quality into and the time into it.
And if I could hop in for a second and kind of get back to timing, Sean just mentioned, if you're addressing a personal statement to a specific school, really pay attention to that. And along those same lines, we all do different things. There are, the same basic building blocks of an application package. We have different deadlines, different ways of doing things. So you really want to pay attention to what each and every school is doing and make sure you're adhering to that and not just taking some overarching advice and going with that. So you want to identify the schools that you could seriously see yourself attending, and make sure you have a spreadsheet with all their deadlines, everything, all the pertinent information for their application process. Make sure you're communicating with those offices, because for us, we opened our application August 5th, and we are already making decisions and sending them out for all of our 2022 classes. We have an early decision deadline that you'll see if you look at the Baylor Law website of November 12th. That is non-binding. So what that means is we're just guaranteeing you a decision by December 1st. However, right now we're at a 2 to 4 week kind of turnaround at this time. I do think that will not slow down necessarily. I think that something that could slow down is scholarshiping. In the past couple of years, what we've done is, if you're admitted maybe like January, February, we give you a different seat deposit deadline. So you could be potentially considered for scholarships at a later time. And we have a lot of different decision statuses. So, if you're looking for a fall application at Baylor, for example, we're also looking at you for spring of the following year potential. You might be submitting, and I encourage you to submit multiple applications at once to Baylor Law and not wait. So absolutely 100% make sure you're submitting the strongest application possible, but earlier rather than later this year. And I just say, pretend that I didn't put early on an early decision deadline, and keep November 12th in mind. But it's also important to keep the lines of communication open with us. If you have specific questions and personal situations, we want to connect with you and really dive deep into your own individual situation.
Barbara, can I jump in with some questions from the chat?
Absolutely. I think that would be great.
So Dean Weinberg has actually been answering questions in the chat, which I really appreciate. So I'm not going to repeat those. But there was a question about how you look at GPAs with respect to major GPA, graduate classes, different majors, et cetera. There were several questions along those lines. So are there different ways that you approach the GPA beyond just that raw LSAT number?
We'll let anybody jump in who wants to tackle that one. Sam?
I'll start. So we don't spend, I'll just say we don't have a whole day to go through your transcripts multiple times. LSAC provides us with an awesome summary, which you all are probably familiar with on that CAS report on the front. If you haven't seen it, you will get that once your application, your documents are all in, and you'll see what I'm referring to. So we see year to year of your academic history, and that tells us a lot of information about what GPA you made that year, that academic year, and or that summer, or then another academic year if you went to summer school. So we see a progression, and it tells us the different schools that you attended in a chronological order. And that gives us a lot of good information. It also gives us information about the median GPA of the people at that school who applied to law school, at multiple years worth of people from those different schools. We will see, for instance, some students may have transferred. So you may have had a bad start at one particular school, and then you transfer to another school and your GPA is a lot higher, or you're at that school. So we'll see the GPA that's really high from the school you graduated from, but LSAC will provide us with the overall GPA. We see everything, we consider everything. So that's why the addenda statement is important. A lot of us will offer you an addenda statement to explain bumps in the road, or at times you may have changed your mind, or whatever the case may be. Those are very important things for you to let us know what would have, or what happened at that time to cause those changes, whether they were up or primarily down times in your life.
I'm going to ask kind of a follow-up about that, and I think I'll go to Natalia on this. Natalia, you guys have had a pretty good increase in your median GPA at A&M, and so clearly that's been of some significance to you all. Are you interested in addendums about where the little blips are? And if you could tell us, what addendum do I want to see and one do I really not want to see?
Sure. That's a great question. I think my answer will apply to like most addendums. I think it's important to be sure that there's a purpose for why we're reading it, and that you're taking responsibility for what has occurred. So a lot of the time, what we see are GPA or LSAT addenda that say, this happened. And so basically the applicant is asking us to just ignore what the GPA or the LSAT is because this thing happened. So part of the reason we can't ignore that is because law school is really hard, and it's also kind of a magnet for things in your life that are going to happen. And so whatever occurred in your past could likely happen again in law school. And what we're looking to see is, did you learn from your experience, and did you gain skills and a system to make sure that you don't fall prey to the same situation? Because it's going to be much harder than it was before, and we don't want to put you in a situation where you're going to fail again. So I think it's important when you're writing this addenda to really be reflective before you write it, and think about, what did I learn? What would I do now if this were to occur again? And then that gives us a better sense that you have truly learned from the situation. If it was a learning situation, right? Sometimes it's something that you couldn't fix or change, but seeing how would you utilize your skills and your competencies if the situation presented itself in law school. And so that can be helpful. In terms of the other degrees, sometimes that's the case, right? We're a state institution, so we love receiving applications from our veterans, and a lot of times there are a lot of different experiences that they've gone through in terms of when they went to school, if they stopped school, went, and then came back and finished school. And so it's important, if it's not very clearly evident by your transcripts, that you could submit an addendum to explain your trajectory, and explain to us how you were able to manage your situation better presently. And so we do take that into consideration in any additional master's or PhD programs, but just remembering that what we have to report is the cumulative GPA. Same as if you have 2 undergraduate degrees, your first one is the one that counts, not your second one. That can be hard sometimes for people to find out because they think, okay, I'll just do another undergraduate degree to overcome that GPA. And that, that's not the case in terms of what we report. It is what we review, but it's just not what we get to report.
There were also there was an interesting question about whether the age of the candidate affects your decisions. I think that probably is a question about being older, but also about being younger. I know I encounter students from both ends.
Absolutely. Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll take that one. So no, there's never the right time to go to law school. I think the perfect time to go is when you are ready academically, financially, and in every other way. When your family's ready for it, it's 3 years of intense work. For us, it's 3 years. We don't have a part-time program. So we're full-time on campus in Lubbock. And so, when you're ready to make that commitment. We've had students who are 18. We've had students who were in their 60s when they started the program. We actually admitted a 16-year-old a couple of years ago, but she ended up going to SMU. So because she lived in Dallas and that was close to home. So yeah, I think, age is not going to be an issue, whether that's young, old, whatever it is, wherever you fall on the timeline. I think that I was non-traditional myself. I started law school in my 30s. And I think that for me, it was great because I knew by that time that I was absolutely mature enough to handle it. I think if I had started straight out of college, I don't know if I would have been as successful as I was in my 30s. However, that said, there are a lot of people that go from high school to college to law school, and it's great for them. They never fall out of their study habits. They're able to just kind of go all the way through. And I sort of had to reteach myself some study habits and how to read for long periods of time and things like that. So as far as age, I think anytime that you're ready is the right time to go. But if anybody else wants to chime in, please do.
Anyone else? And if anyone would also like to address the question of taking a gap year and how it is you evaluate a student who may have just graduated and decides to take a gap.
Gap year of 5.
Yeah. So first off, the headline answer is age does not matter. We are also a school. Our youngest candidate is often 19 or 20 because we have a 3-3 program, and so we will have Tulane seniors who ultimately are part of the first year class. We're really proud of our 3-3s. In fact, they tend to be exceptional students, exceptional ambassadors for Tulane. They're staying for 6 years or longer sometimes if they go for a 3rd degree, which sounds crazy, but we've had it happen. But let me address the question another way though, is that I did see an earlier chat question, which I don't know if we covered before it flew by. Someone was asking about candidates with significant work experience and how we're ultimately going to view, academic record. The academic record is in your distant past. So let me start with the bad news. It doesn't go away, and law school is predominantly an academic exercise. And so we do need to evaluate candidates from that context. Work experience does not replace an academic record. Now, work experience and professional accomplishments do indicate successes potentially in a law school environment. But at the same time, it's not actually the work experience, it's actually the skill sets behind that work experience. So for example, whether I'm looking at an academic record or a resume, I'm looking to see if that candidate has demonstrated the ability to solve complex problems. I'm looking to see if the candidate has shown that their communication skills are top-notch. If in their professional realm, have they accomplished things, maybe won awards or promotions because of their writing skills or because of their ability to make persuasive arguments. So even in that context, just because you have work experience not only does it not replace the academic record, but I would all encourage candidates who typically are older because you need time to have that work experience, to really think about those issues and topics. If you came from a professional field that is maybe very, your resume may be great for advancement in your professional field, but you still might want to review your resume and think about the skill sets that we're talking about today, and maybe retinker or rejigger your resume a little bit, especially if you're in a very technical field. Your technical accomplishments, if you were in a science or engineering background, I may not be particularly, knowledgeable about that, unique chemical that you discovered and received a patent for. But at the same time, if your letters of recommendation as well as your broader professional accomplishments show that you presented your work in conferences and you've used your work in particularly constructive ways, that can be really helpful in that regard. Now, as far though as the other way around, not only do we have three candidates who are really young, if you're just coming out of college, but you're ready, like we're talking about, you're ready for law school. In fact, I think in this day and age, we're seeing more candidates. One of the reasons, my theory behind why we saw such an increase in applications this year was we look at our pool here at Tulane. It was an increase of the candidates right out of college. And it was also a significant increase in candidates who had time over the pandemic to really reflect on their life goals. And sort of that's what created this crunch. There's a bunch of people all kind of realizing that they're ready for law school at the same time. And that's completely fine. I would say if you are approaching the law school admissions process and the question about a gap year, take a gap year, but take it not because it is something we look for. This is not a situation where you take the gap year or job because it will look better for law school admission. It may or may not, but it ultimately, most of the time, candidates take the time off. And I find that a candidate who's not entirely sure law school is right for them, the gap year experience, whether it be legal or non-legal, can really kind of crystallize what they're passionate about. Some candidates will probably take the gap year and we'll never see them again because they discover something they're passionate about and it's not law school. And that's terrific because that's sort of really what the point is. Law school is a really short period of time. One story I often talk about is prior to admissions, I had a short stint where I worked in career development as well. And I often, the student I worked with who came in day one and she was passionate about, she's going to be a family law attorney. And she then got her first summer job after first year in a firm that specialized in family law. Oh my God, she hated life. She hated everything about family law. First off, she didn't like kids. She didn't like divorce. She liked the concept of it, but it ultimately didn't play out the way she wanted. And that's what gap years are great for, because if you can figure out, even if it's not about law, if you can figure out in that period of time, what types of problems do you like solving? What type of clients might you like working for or not working for in the future? It'll save you a lot of pain when you get to law school and figuring out, because this is what our students at all of our law schools are still doing. They're still trying to figure out, what type of lawyer they want to be. And the gap year experience probably did more for them personally and future professionally than it did actually help them from an admissions, improvement in their admissions process and their results.
Fantastic. I have one question that came up a lot in our preliminary questions for our sign up here that I want to throw out to the panel. That's kind of the opposite. We have a lot of students who that's what they've been in their lives as students. And so they ask a lot of questions about extracurricular activities. What do you want to see in extracurricular activities? What do you think enhances an application? So how is it, who wants to tackle how you view extracurriculars?
Go ahead and say a couple things about it. I think it's important that just like when you're talking about your major selection, you pick things that you're interested in and passionate about. You don't have to be in pre-law society, mock trial, moot court. If that's what you are involved in, wonderful. But don't do it just because you think that's the only way to get into law school. And we also don't want to see that you were just involved in literally everything on the planet, like just a whole list of just, okay, all these organizations. Pick things that you're passionate about, that you really enjoy being involved with, and maybe hold progressive leadership roles. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, leadership is an important skill that we're looking for, and showing that you can commit to something and, really again, kind of progress in your involvement there. We also like to see community involvement, giving back to where you're living, not just campus involvement. So dedicating time to the community you're living in. I also want to note that some people, you can't get involved because you have to work to support yourself, to pay for your education. That speaks volumes about you. It's okay if you don't have anything, extracurricular wise because you are having to work. That tells your story, and it's a different experience. And so you want to talk about the hours that you were working, the skills that you gained on the job. Maybe one of your letters of recommendation could come from your supervisor. And then back to kind of extracurriculars, don't just say what the organization was, but again, tell us a little bit about your role in that organization. I always tell people that don't assume that we know everything. An example I use at Baylor, we had this thing called All University Sing. It's one of the largest off-Broadway productions in the world, and I'm kind of obsessed with it as a double bear. So if someone puts on their resume that they were an All University Sing chairman, I'm like, whoa, that is an incredible amount of work. They dedicated so much time to that, and they kept up their grades. That's amazing. But my colleagues at other schools might be like, cool, I have no idea what that means. So really make sure you're explaining the different organizations, especially if it's something that is unique to your institution, really giving as much education about what you've done as possible.
Sean, go ahead.
So I also wanted to say some of the things that I don't like to see on extracurriculars, if you're putting these on your resume, are those one-time events, because I'm thinking that maybe you just went because your friend was going. If you serve food at a Thanksgiving, food line for the community one time, I'm thinking that you went because your friends were going, or you went for Habitat for Humanity one time. I'm thinking that that was probably because somebody was going and you just piggybacked with them. But if it's consistent, that looks amazing. The other thing I want you to think about is that every time, again, we look at everything holistically. So if you've got a ton of extracurriculars on your resume, and then I'm looking at your transcripts and your grades really suffered, I'm kind of thinking, did you balance your academics with a lot of the responsibilities? Did you take on too much in extracurriculars and didn't focus enough on your academics? And are you going to do that in law school? Otherwise, if maybe your grades were a little bit lower, but let's say, for instance, you adopted your siblings because your parents had passed away. So you're having to work and raise your siblings while attending college. That's going to, again, holistically, I'm going to look at that and go, wow, they were actually able to keep their grades up to the point that they were while having all of this other responsibility. So think about that in terms of balance. You want to balance your extracurricular activities with keeping your grades up, with taking on leadership roles and having responsibilities outside of that. If we can't really see, if you want us to really see that, you can write an addendum for it and really pinpoint that. That's one of the things that we say about addendums. There's grade addendums, there's LSAT addendums, there are diversity statements, there's character and fitness. But for us, I don't know about other schools, I don't want to speak for them, but for us, if you have another thing that you want to add on there, if you attach it to your file, we are going to read it. So just something for you to know.
I just want to add. One thing about the holistic review that we do is, and this is for those people who are not political science or econ, who are worried about, well, I'm a science major, or I'm a zoology major or accounting major. How do you determine if I want to go to law school, and how do you do that? You don't have to have that pre-law or that internship at a law firm. What we're looking for is that passion that you have in accounting or zoology or business or whatever the case may be, But that connection point that we look for, especially on our, we ask for it in our personal statement, is we want to know a little bit why you want to be a lawyer, right? And I see it all the time about how applicants are like, you know, I started off in business, or I started off as pre-med, and then I took this class, or I heard this speaker say this, and my inner self, I've always wanted to be a lawyer ever since I was a kid, but I did this because of this, or I did it because of this. We want to see that change as to what was it that made you want to be a lawyer, or if and it just has to make sense, right? And so an accounting major could absolutely make sense for a lot of us. Zoology makes sense in a lot of ways, believe it or not. Environmental law, animal rights, right? Accounting, they want to go into corporate law. So it doesn't really matter what your major is, as long as your story as to why you want to go to law school makes sense. And that's where, you know, I think David made a point of, you know, using the entire application to your advantage to explain all of this and for it all to make sense. That's what we're really looking for. So the extracurriculars, I wouldn't be too worried about or ashamed of putting the fact that you were the president of the Business Law Society or the zoology or whatever the case or organizations may be, as long as it makes sense in the end.
I was just to add to that, you know, I was just thinking about one candidate, and I saw a question earlier before too. You know, certainly there are always going to be candidates at every law school that just stand out. But y'all, most of us did not, like, you know, find a cure for cancer. Most of us have not figured out world peace. Maybe lost a future lawyer from one of our schools, you know, will be part of that process. So, you know, in the scheme of things, you know, as much as extracurriculars and accomplishments, they seem like the, you know, the big wow factors that are there. I often feel it's sometimes the quieter moments that people don't think. It's the reflective moments that we have in our lives that really matter. One applicant comes to mind, one of our students at Tulane. You can find her featured on our website and on our Instagram, because obviously when I have like a world championship gymnast, it's a cool thing, right? But in fact, the reality of the situation is we think right now about the world of sports law and the world of you know, dealing with issues of gender and sexual assault and all of the things that are in the news. It's not the fact that this candidate won a gold medal at the World Championships that matters. It's actually the reflection that she brought about what it means to be an athlete, what it means to be a woman in these complex times in sports, where we see right now that young athletes are facing mental, physical, sexual abuse. And how do we change that? And in truth, that could have been a candidate who didn't win a gold medal at the World Championships. This could have been, you know, an amateur athlete who, you know, barely won a competition at her home gym, but still would have had the same outcome in the law school admissions process, because this candidate showed a level of awareness and self-reflection about how the experience they bring to the table can ultimately contribute to the conversations in our classrooms. So as much as I get it, extracurriculars and accomplishments and awards, we're asking for them. I'm not saying hide them from us. Definitely let us know what you've accomplished. And many times we're just as interested in sort of the connection you have to what your next step is. And lawyers do work in legal, you know, law firms and courtrooms, but they also are compliance managers. They're also, you know, in this instance, someone working for a university for dealing with NCAA compliance issues likely will benefit because they have a law degree and they can ultimately help contribute to substantial policy issues that protect athletes. So sometimes the obvious connection to law school isn't not only something that you don't need to make, but it's sort of, it will be organic as part of your overall story and presentation.
Fantastic. That's very well put. Dr. Watson, you see anything else in the chat that you think we need to address at this point?
Yeah, there was a question about reapplying if you were turned down in the last cycle, or I suppose if you're turned down this year, you know, is it okay to reapply to the same schools? And do
Excellent question.
something different.
Who wants to jump on reapplications?
I'd love to answer that.
Okay.
We actually just finished this month. We set aside September for any counseling sessions with students from the previous year that want to talk about their application and find out maybe what they can do to improve. So absolutely. I mean, again, something that's important to know, I think, for applicants is that, you know, of the 4,000 applications that we receive, when we, you know, the committee reviews the file, you know, we vote whether people are admissible or inadmissible. And then from there, we then decide who to admit. And so some people are denied based just on timing, right? Like they applied too late and we were full and we couldn't accept them. Sometimes it is, you know, something else that they need to improve or work on. And then sometimes there are things that might, you know, might be more serious that might prevent them from like sitting for the bar exam. And so then that's something we take into consideration. But a lot of times it has nothing to do with the application. It's just the timing. And so if you don't know that, right, it's hard to take that rejection too personally. And so, you know, I would reach out to schools to find out if they're willing to talk to you about your application. I mean, we don't discuss how we voted or any notes about that, but we just talk generally about our applicant pool. This year, for example, a lot of things that we had to talk about was the crazy application cycle, the jump in LSATs. You know, for us, we keep increasing our medians, and so it's difficult for our applicants sometimes to look at the ABA report and think that they would be admissible and maybe they aren't. So getting some of that insight can be really helpful. And of course, like each year is a new year. So we're excited to receive reapplications, and we often admit students. You know, if you did better on an LSAT or you did better on a GRE and you just applied late last cycle and you're applying really early, we had a couple of those people come through this month. And so I'm hopeful for them. So, I mean, there's no reason to try again. We don't hold I don't think anybody on this panel holds anything against students that we happen to deny that we, you know, can reapply.
Any other comment about that? Go ahead.
I'll just say, I hate to punt on a question, but I will in this case. While policies may vary from school to school when it comes to alumni, this is often a really good time to mention that many pre-law advisors at college and university campuses are actually might be in a better position to help you. Certainly, you know, the one thing to mention is, you know, to the point that was just made, different schools may, reach a result on your file for different reasons. Different readers of your file might get to a result in different reasons. So even if you get the opinion of one admissions officer, it may not necessarily kind of capture all of the aspects of your file that you might like to improve. So if you are a recent graduate, or even if you're not a recent graduate, you might reach out to your college or university where you graduated, find out if pre-law advising on your campus is available for alumni. And in that instance, make an appointment. Many pre-law advisors will be happy to kind of give you an overview and give a sense of aspects of your application that you could look to improve in a future year.
And I'll just throw in that pitch for pre-law advisors. Virtually every pre-law advisor I know also serves alumni. And
yeah,
so
I know that I was going to say virtually most do. I'm not going to say which school I know doesn't, but that's why I always watch. There are a few schools, to be candid. I think that there are a few schools that have so many applicants to law school that they might not have the capacity to be as helpful. But this is one situation where I would ask rather than, guess. And certainly if there is some, they might have a limited hours or limited schedule, but this is absolutely a great way to reconnect with your home institution as well.
Great answer. I like that one very much. Wendy, unless you've got another one, I can go to one of our questions.
Go for it, Barbara.
We had a question about part-time law school, and I know that there our few part-time programs yet. Is there anyone here on this panel who has a part-time program?
Yes, we have a part-time day and part-time evening. We actually started as an evening program. We had to suspend it this year because we didn't have enough applicants, but we are re-upping it for next year. So yeah, evening program usually takes 4 years instead of 3. First year set for you, you go between 6 and 8:45, 4 days a week, and then it's kind of choose your own adventure after that. We also have a part-time day for working professionals. We don't have Friday classes, so it's 4 classes Monday to Thursday. And you can kind of get with the dean of academics and kind of set your schedule for that. So yeah, we have options for both the evening and the day.
Great, thank you. Here's an interesting question. I want to just kind of toss out to everybody. I want to hear everybody give a brief answer to this question, if you possibly can. If you could give only one tip to an applicant about the law school admissions process, what would it be? Sean, I'm going to go to you.
Start early. If you think this is what you want to do, give yourself plenty of time to build relationships with the people that are going to write your recommendation letters, to study for the LSAT so that you can get that score that will get you into your school that you really want to go to. Give yourself plenty of time, and if you're butting up against some of the regular decision deadlines and that the seats are gone and everything else, you can throw your hat into the ring. We're still accepting and reviewing applications, but to give yourself the absolute best chance of getting a seat, getting hopefully that scholarship that gets you, helps you pay for law school, giving yourself plenty of time is, I think, just key to this whole process, because it does take a while. And also, I'm sorry, I'm throwing in a bonus tip because this is really important. This is a hurry up and wait type of scenario. I need you to, get your application in, and then there's going to be a waiting period, and it is frustrating. Those of us who have gone through it ourselves through the application process know how frustrating it is. We are so sorry for that. We're not doing it. It's not a hazing ritual. We promise. We are going through and getting through applications as fast as possible to get you a decision, but you're going to need to get a hobby. I know we're all type A. You're going to have to find something else to occupy your mind while you're waiting for those decisions, please.
Okay, Rick, one tip.
Yeah, I'd like to say that your legal career starts when you apply. And I mention that because we are a professional school and you should act accordingly. Your application, it becomes a component part of your bar application. So it starts there. The way you speak to the admissions team and kind of address us. I make a note every time an applicant calls or emails, and calling every week to ask about the status of your application is probably not the best approach. And also, this is kind of a pet peeve of mine. You are going to be an advocate in 3 years, so don't have your parents call for you. That is a huge pet peeve of mine. So yeah, this is a legal profession, and it starts when you apply. And I'm also going to do a bonus one. There's plenty of information out there. Take it with a grain of salt. I visit the Reddit pages every once in a while just because I'm curious what information is thrown out there. If you have any questions, ask the admissions professionals. Don't ask your fellow Redditors. So yeah.
Thank you for that bonus tip. I always like to hear that one. Okay, Catherine, what's your tip?
Okay, I'm kind of going between two here, but I think that it's really important to select the school that is the right fit for you. So that starts with where you're going to apply. Only submit applications to schools that you could genuinely see yourself attending, that you would actually consider attending. Don't just apply to apply because it's expensive. And then also take the time to do your personal research through attending a virtual or in-person event, doing a personal, individual visit, sitting in on a class, connecting with current students, really doing your research and not just stopping at, okay, I was admitted and I got this scholarship, because you want to go somewhere that you're going to, law school's hard. You want to go to a place where you feel that you're going to have access to the programming that you want. You feel connected to the community there. And that is so different for every single person. I can't speak for everyone, but I think we probably all have this sentiment. I know our job isn't to be like, okay, you all have to come to our law school and that's it. We're the only law school on the planet. We want to help you help educate you about what we have to offer and really get to know you. And that way we can help you as you navigate this very personal path towards the law school that is the best fit for you.
Very good. Natalia, one tip. And you get a bonus if you want.
I'll follow instructions and stick to one. Since that would be my bonus one, is follow instructions. No, so I think my tip is learn how to ask for help. I think it's really important to understand that everybody who does well in law school does it because they had help from somebody. And there is an assumption that some people have help because they have family members that are lawyers, etc. I would counter argue that because I think lawyers, we give the worst advice. Law school is not what it was when lawyers went to school. It's not what it was when I went to law school. And so being able to ask for help of your admissions offices, of former students, being able to ask help when you get there from faculty members and office hours, of mentors from your community, to really be able to ask so that you know what's going on. The best way to succeed is to be apprised of all of the opportunities and information that are out there. And what you'll get in return is when people know you're asking, they'll know that you're seeking. And so when they're looking for stuff, they're going to seek you back out for opportunities and information. And so I really think it's important to get outside of yourself and know that nobody knows what they're doing, even if they say they know what they're doing. And if you're unafraid to ask for help, you're going to find, I think, a lot of people that are in your corner, willing to cheer you on.
Fantastic. And I will say on behalf of pre-law advisors, it's always a surprise to me that there's students out there who just want to go it alone. I don't know why you would go it alone when you have advisors and admissions people who can assist you on the way. So I give big thumbs up to that advice. Okay, Sam, what's your point?
I had one good one, and Catherine took that one, but that's okay. But I have a backup. One of the biggest things that when I'm talking to people this year is have a good strategy. We've mentioned some good things to do. I think it was Sean who put the link to the GPA LSAT range in there that LSAT offers, which is just one part of the process. But have a good strategy. And Barbara, you just mentioned get help. I know we did a survey of some students to find out where they're getting their help from. And I was pleased to see that the majority of them, 70% of them, went to pre-law advisors.
Right.
We were second, we came in second, which I was fine with that. 40% came to law school admissions professionals. But I was so pleased to see that pre-law advisors were first, and 70% was a large number. But in the back of my head, I was like, what about that 30%? Why isn't 100% of these students going to see the pre-law advisor? So get some help, but have a good strategy. And if you don't know what a good strategy is, what I'm referring to, then you need to talk to a pre-law advisor and figure that out. You want to give yourself a good opportunity. All of you want to be lawyers. There's 199 law schools out there. You want to have a good fit. That's the part that I was going to throw in there that Catherine mentioned. But, do your work, do your due diligence. Don't give up on yourself before you even start the process. That's why having a good strategy will give you the opportunity to achieve your goal and your dream of being a lawyer, a judge, or whatever the case may be. And then even after that, even if you don't get the outcome you desire, don't give up then either. Come and talk to us after that's over, and we can probably help you and to help you figure out where you may have gone wrong or what you can do to do differently the next time if you decided to apply again.
Fantastic. Thank you. David, you get to wrap up. What's your one tip?
Okay, so here's a life tip, because we've already covered all the law school admissions tips. Here's a life tip. So connecting the dots, You can ask the admissions officers. Barbara doesn't know why you don't ask the pre-law advisors. And Rick makes the point y'all end up on Reddit anyway. I think here's the thing. I get it on some level, actually. You don't trust a lot of people. I don't trust a lot of people because I don't know any of you. I trust a lot of pre-law advisors and my colleagues because I've gotten to know them over time. But I get it. Like you really you're trying to assess all this information, and you don't know me. And I work for Tulane. I'm wearing their gear, and I'm biased. So obviously, there's an issue with my information. And guess what? That's good. You should be critically looking at all the information you receive from any source. That's helpful. At some point, you do have to, use the information you have and assess it and make good choices for you. And that in this environment, I get it. It can be really hard. So my life tip for you is actually from my career services days. It's a skill that you should be working on, whether you're looking for a job or not. And that's informational interviewing. Finding people in the world who are doing the things that you aspire to do or want to do. Is there a graduate of your program who, maybe you were a STEM major and then you met a graduate who became an attorney. Reach out to them. And actually, you don't have to be applying for a job. Most graduates, successful graduates of programs are really excited to talk about their accomplishments. Send them an email, say, I Googled around and found that you're from my hometown and you're doing something really interesting. Can I have a cup of coffee? Can I invite you to have, a cup of coffee with me? Or in this day and age, can we do it over Zoom? Whatever you feel comfortable with or is in your schedule. But truthfully, I think a lot of the information, law schools are happy to connect you with our graduates and our students. And so certainly ask us for that information. But a lot of times the best information you can receive often is from your own initiative to think about the people out there. To that earlier point, most of our students are their first lawyer in their family. The majority of our students, and certainly there are many of you are first generation college students, and that's another challenge and hurdle, and we congratulate you on your success so far. And you might feel this is daunting. But the truth of the matter is, like I said, if you send out an email to a successful, proud graduate from your college or university, you are going to get more yeses than you know. I'll be not only I'm meeting you for coffee, I'm treating you. They're going to be really excited to hear that you're taking an interest in them and you can learn from them. And building mentorship even before you become a law student can be helpful and also help you navigate this process.
Wonderful life tip. So I'm going to give Wendy a shot here. Dr. Watson, you are Pre-Law Advisor Supreme. Do you have one tip?
Oh,
Hard for us to just limit it to one tip.
yeah, I guess probably my tip, the tip that has come up about 3 times today, is to take your time. Law school is not going anywhere. So if you're not sure that you want to go to law school, wait until you're sure. It is a major commitment of time and resources and energy, and going into that and then discovering that it's a bad choice for you is just awful. So definitely take your time to make sure that this is a good choice for you. And I would definitely agree that doing informational interviews, stalking people on LinkedIn, to look at their resumes. This person is doing what I want to do. What kind of educational background did they have? Talking to people who got the degree, 20 years ago, would they do the same thing today? Because that may not be the case. So really doing your research to make sure that this is the degree for you and that you really want it. Because otherwise you're going to regret it.
And just to emphasize one more time, Reddit is not research. That I want to, the final word that I would add on this, and especially as I thank all of our panel members who took the time to do this today, one of the few side benefits we've had from the COVID era is that there's so much more information that the law schools have available on their websites. And you can interact in so many ways now from your own home with law schools. So be sure any school that you're interested in, you go to their website and you take advantage of any opportunities that there are to do virtual tours or to read more about their programs or connect. Is there anything any of you would like to say about resources you have on your websites?
Barbara, you take the words right out of my mouth. I've been on broken record. There are no upsides to a global pandemic, none whatsoever, and yet we find them. We are continuing to offer a vibrant virtual environment. I put in the chat the link for our schedule. You can schedule one-on-one for questions. We have group information sessions, and that's not going away in anytime soon. And so I actually do think that even when we get back on planes, trains, automobiles on a more regular basis, this has been a successful way to outreach. Many of you are telling us you prefer this because you don't have to like schlep to the student center, or you can do this at home, and time zones are less of a problem. And from our perspective, that's great, less jet lag. So there, I still do hope and to be back on your campuses in the hopefully, sooner rather than later. But the online environment that many of us have created has been great, and we really encourage you to use it. I will say that the thing that sort of none of us have said, because we used to all say it, and then this year also changed things, is like we really emphasize that you have to visit our campuses to make decisions. It's weird because most of the candidates who enrolled this fall did not visit in the year they applied, which kind of goes against the advice that we want you to really visit our campuses, get a sense of our community and culture. And this year that went out the window. As restrictions change and evolve, I do anticipate we will have more opportunities for you to travel and visit our campuses, and we're going to be looking forward to that. But in the meantime, certainly take advantage of all of the online components that fit your schedule.
And this is great. The chat is just filling up right now with all of our panel members telling you how to connect with them personally, how to connect with their virtual visits. And so for all of you out there who've listened to this today, you just don't have any excuse. You have so much ability to connect with these admissions professionals. And if you're going to be lawyers in the future, I think it's a skill you need to develop now, right? So
also, if you follow us on Instagram, that's a good way to just see, current student stories, and without coming to campus, getting a really good feel for the culture and the environment is just following us. And that's easy. You guys scroll through that. I mean, I scroll through it all day long, right? So it's just an easy way to get a feel for each school.
Catherine?
I was just nodding my head, agreeing. I think that's such a great way to really get a sense of the community as a whole. And there's a lot of activity there. So I'm just
I think the campus visit is still the best way to determine if a law school is right for you, if you're going to be comfortable there. But at least this helps you narrow down to get, as we would say in constitutional law, more narrowly focused on which schools you might want to go to.
If you're anything like I was limited on time and resources to visit schools. So I actually waited until I was admitted before I visited in person, but I did a lot of visiting online before that happened. So just if you are limited, that might be a consideration for you.
Excellent point. Well, I want to thank everyone. We had so many good participants here, so many great questions. And we will, of course, I don't have to tell the people on here about us posting the recording because you're here, but we will have recording. The link for next week, for those of you who are interested in talking about personal statements, letters of recommendation, resumes, all of those parts of the file, we will be back 3 o'clock next week with another excellent panel of legal professions. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for coming to be on our panel. we appreciate it so much. And that's our story for today. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
And I assume, Wendy, you're going to stop the recording.